Hello everyone, welcome. This is Translation. My name is August and we are here with Dr. Kate Balestrieri and Lauren Dummit. And you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Great. Thanks so much, August. Thanks for having us on the show. My name is Dr. Kate Balestrieri. I'm a licensed clinical and forensic psychologist and the co-founder of Triune Therapy Group, which is a group therapy practice here in Los Angeles, California. We specialize in treating all different kinds of trauma and sexual issues, ranging from sexual dysfunction to sexual identity issues, sex addiction, and sexual harassment and offender issues. So we address a wide range of all different kinds of topics and problems that people run into throughout their lives.
Very cool, very cool.
My name is Lauren Dummit, and since Kate just did a beautiful job of describing what we do at our practice, I'll let that be. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sex addiction therapist, and like Kate said, we work with a range of mental health issues, really looking at the trauma underlying a lot of mental health issues, but also a lot of varying degrees of human sexuality and the issues that arise around that.
Amazing. So today we are going to talk a little bit about coming out as trans, a little bit about, the idea of feeling wrong, the idea of people in your life seeing you as wrong, and kind of coping mechanisms on how to deal with that as a trans human or a parent of a transgender child, or even a psychologist dealing with a transgender patient for the first time.
Or just anybody who happens to care about a trans human.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Siblings,
that doesn't
friends.
come without questions as well.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone has questions. Everyone wants to learn, and people who aren't accepting probably should learn, and people who are accepting want to learn. Exactly. Fingers crossed, right?
Well, and a huge thing you see, and you see this with every type of issue, is just generationally. And I think the older generations, it's often more difficult for them to adapt because things are newer, and so they're less accepting. And I find, like, I have stepchildren that are like in their early 20s, and they are totally open. They, have been educated about it in school and with their friends, and so it's a totally different paradigm from someone like my parents, or who are thinking like, oh, okay, where they might be really open and accepting, but they're not used to it. It's just really foreign for them, and so it's seen as weird.
Definitely. With the idea of the LGBT community being gay is a lot more normal than it was 15 years ago. And now we have transgenders in the spotlight right now, and people are being accepted as they come out. There's still people who are trying to halt that.
Right.
And
Well, and I think for a lot of the people who are more resistant to the idea of a transgender community being a legitimate way of being is fear, right?
Yeah.
And as human beings, I think we're hardwired to be resistant to the things that we're afraid of. So doing videos like this, it's my hope that we can start to provide some education, because but where I was going with this earlier is that in our culture we've had such a dichotomous understanding of gender, and in other cultures they don't. They're much more fluid around their understanding of genders and celebratory of people who don't fall on the binary continuum of male and female. And so I think one thing I'd like to impart to any parents or friends of loved ones about learning about the transgender community is that there's a whole paradigm of understanding gender that exists beyond this conversation, that exists beyond our culture, and it's really, I think, an act of love to educate yourself further, whether or not you agree with your loved one's decision.
Yeah, I agree. Learning and opening your mind to the history or people or other people's stories, and understanding that there is feeling and power in just putting effort into trying to understand, trying to accept, and hopefully you grow in that. And then and another thing that you said is that this idea that a parent is trying to do the right thing by their child by deciding their gender at birth, or deciding that it's too hard for you to be trans. I want you to be normal. I want you to go through life exactly quotes on normal. I want you to go through life happy and normal. And inside the transgender community, that's the whole issue, is that they're not happy. We're not happy as what we were born as, and so we're going to do this because our end goal is to be happy.
the end goal for a trans person is to be normal, but to
Exactly.
be normal means to transition and to be confirmed in what is understood between our brain and our bodies.
Right, so they can feel comfortable in their own skin. That is
Mhm.
what feels normal. You know, another thing that I've noticed too is that sometimes, clearly there's a lot of fear that creates the kind of resistance, but I also find a lot of it is laziness. You know, like for example, some of the older generations that didn't grow up with the internet or computers or social media, they're like, oh, I'm just not even going to get into that. Well, you kind of need to, because this is what our society is made up of now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like sometimes I overhear like older people when they're talking with younger people, and they might be talking about their friends and using the pronouns that they prefer, which may be they.
Mm-hmm.
That's so confusing. Can you just pick one? I can't keep up with all this transgender stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like it's too much. It feels like I'm not going to change because this is
It doesn't
who
impact
you
me.
are. It doesn't impact me, so I'm not going to change.
Exactly. But then everything that you say impacts that person.
Right. Right.
You're belittling their existence by not trying.
Right.
Exactly.
And if you were to go back in time and say, well, if you like, for example, maybe with racism, that is so, it's not okay to be racist now. Back in the day, it might have been. And so now it wasn't right morally, but it was more accepted,
Yeah,
right?
society.
And so if you were to go back now and say, that's just like refusing to conform to not using like, damaging,
derogatory terms.
right.
Yeah.
You can't really refuse.
Well, and I think that when people start to dismiss the experiences of other groups of people, it's really, under the guise of, well, that doesn't impact me, or I don't know anyone like that, or it's too confusing, I can't even think about that. It's a really hostile but subtle type of marginalization, and that contributes to the pain that the trans community continues to go through, even as they fight for acceptance as veritable humans. So I think it's really important that we are mindful of the language that we use, and that we ask people, what are the pronouns you would prefer? And we don't know.
And that we don't assume.
Well, and that's the
Right.
toughest part, and it's I struggle with it, and as a trans person myself, I still struggle with it. But just trying is the thing. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to ask this because I don't want to offend you, and it's like, well, you can be an open book. The act of offending someone by accident is different than offending someone on purpose.
Right.
And not trying is offensive with the pronouns, and parents have a harder time with it because they grow up with this idea that they watched your life and they have this vision for you, and they forget about this idea that you have a vision for your own life.
Right.
Well,
I think that's true for a lot of parents, regardless of whether we're talking about transgender children, but especially in that regard. Right?
And there's some enmeshment too, and it's like their own identity has been wrapped up in the identity of their child.
Yeah, they've given you so much that how could you kind of do this, and then there's this guilt of, well, maybe I did something wrong and this happened.
Right.
All of those feelings wear on your child. So if you're going to project those types of, well, where did I do wrong? You can't do this. This isn't normal. They've already felt all of these things, and coming to you and telling you how they feel about who they are, they're already opening themselves up for being not accepted. And
It's a really vulnerable place to be.
extremely.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I think it's really normal for parents to have all of those kinds of questions, especially if they don't quite understand the transgendered experience, or it goes against what they understand their cultural or religious values to be, or any sort of paradigm that it bumps up against and makes them uncomfortable. It's completely appropriate to have all kinds of questions for your child, and to want to understand why, or what changed, or what happened, or was there a pivot point in your life? What was my part in this? But what I think I would like to impart to parents watching this, if any of you are parents watching this, is it's really key that you have your experience separate from your child's coming out to you, right? So if you can take anything away from this, it's really important to make room and space to just be attuned to your child, because they're coming to you in probably the most vulnerable place they've ever been in their lives, and hoping against all odds that you're going to accept and love them anyway. And I think what I hear most from the transgender patients that I work with around the stories of coming out to their parents is this abject fear that they were going to be booted out of their families or beaten mercilessly, emotionally or physically. And that fear is so difficult to face, and it takes a lot of courage to stand up for who you want to be in the world, knowing that that's possibly the reaction you could face. So keep an open mind, call a friend, go to your partner, call your sister or brother, go to your priest or your rabbi, talk to that person about all the questions and feelings that you have so that you can process that before sharing those digested reactions with your child later.
I think it's totally appropriate for a parent to see a therapist as well. I mean,
Absolutely.
nobody is saying that this isn't, you know, something that is challenging for a parent to process.
Yeah.
And I think that it must trigger many of their own issues around sexuality and gender and their experiences and their views. And I think it's important to have some guidance about what's appropriate, what's offensive, how do I feel about this that is separate from their child's experience.
Well, there's this fear, and I think this probably goes for most parents who have a transgender child, is that they're going to lose their child. I'm going to lose my little girl. I'm going to lose my mama's boy. I'm going to lose this person. And, you know, there's this statistic of suicide in the transgender community, and that is actual loss. You know, that's the loss.
Right.
That's the possibility that you're facing.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, and I think a lot of parents do fear that they're going to lose the experience they've had of their child. But to some degree, it's been a fantasy because it's been completely incongruent with how the child experiences themselves. And so mom or dad might think, oh, I'm losing my little boy if he transitions into being a woman. But that little boy has never been the little boy that they believed him to be.
Yeah, no, it's that little boy's been the little boy you've wanted them to be since their entire reality. And another thing to keep in mind is that when your child does come to you, or if you're, you know, a trans human watching this too, and you go to your parent, they have digested, or you have digested your own identity. You know, you've thought about it, you've almost obsessed about it, because it's this idea that you overcome, and then you're finally ready to come out. And you know, some kids will reach out to me and they'll be like, well, what do I do, and what if my parents don't react right? And it's like, well, just remember that you took time to accept this. And you also have to kind of give your parents a little bit of time for them to accept it too. Now, that does not mean that you have to put up with any emotional or physical abuse because of this, ever. That's not okay, ever. But, you know, remember that everyone goes through their own form of acceptance when you're dealing with these kinds of issues.
Well, and I think that brings up a good point that we talk about in therapy all the time, how feelings are temporary. So they might have some negative feelings, and that might be uncomfortable to endure and to feel, but they also will pass, you know, or decrease, you know, and that's just part of their own processing.
Alright guys, so this is the end to this episode with Dr. Kate and Lauren over here, but if you come next week, we're going to be talking a little bit about body image and dealing with body image and what we're really doing to kind of get the body that we feel whole in, right?
Great. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions about anything you've heard here and you want to reach out to Lauren or I for any additional feedback or support, don't hesitate to give us a call or check out our website or listen to our radio show Behind Closed Doors on KABC 790 in Los Angeles, and you can also get the podcast for that on our website. We talk about a lot of similar kinds of issues related to sex and mental health on that show as well, and we'd be happy to field any questions.
Yeah, all their social media and their link to their website and to the radio show will be posted in the details below, along with those social media for translation. Anything else, guys?
No, I think that's it.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you so
All
much.
the best.